While this channel is no stranger to talking about stations in St. John's Wood, this is the first time I've talked about one that actually still exists. This is St. John's Wood. I feel like that dramatic pause was unwarranted, and you have my apology. St. John's Wood is a station on the Jubilee line, but its history goes back to long before that line was opened. Originally, it was a Bakerloo line station, and it replaced two stations on the Metropolitan line. In the 1930s, the Metropolitan line was experiencing severe congestion. The line that ran through St. John's Wood consisted of a pair of tracks which had been fine when they were first built in 1868. But the line extended further and further out, serving more and more destinations, and the outcome was that this pair of tracks had way too many trains. The Metropolitan had three ideas to reduce congestion. The first, the simplest, and the only one they put into effect, was to close their stations at Lord's and Marlborough Road in the early mornings and evenings, which was a stupid idea because it meant that those stations were unusable during rush hours. The second was to add two more tracks, which would have been very expensive and required a lot of demolition. The third was to build a new line from Kilburn, bypass the busy section, and reconnect at Edgware Road. In 1933, though, London Transport took the entire Underground over, apart from the Waterloo and City line, but that's another story. They offered an alternative to quadrupling the line, which was to build a new deep-level tube line. This would be an extension of the Bakerloo line to Finchley Road, which would take over the branch to Stanmore. The Bakerloo line had the extra capacity that the Metropolitan didn't, so it made a lot of sense. Swiss Cottage, Marlborough Road, and St. John's Wood stations would close, and new stations would be built in their stead on the Bakerloo line. Marlborough Road and St. John's Wood, later renamed Lord's, were not particularly busy stations for the most part. Lord's was only really busy during matches at the cricket ground of the same name. Therefore, it was decided that one station would do for both. Oddly enough, even though the old St. John's Wood was the busier station, the new one was sited closer to Marlborough Road. During the planning stages, the name Acacia Road was favoured. London Underground also flirted with just Acacia. The station opened on the 20th of November 1939. The style looks very much like the work of Charles Holden, but it was actually designed by a different architect, Stanley Heaps. Holden was very much in demand at the time, so he had to hand the project off. I always feel a little bit sorry for Stanley Heaps. He's one of those architects who got relegated to second-string projects. The sort of thing that Holden couldn't or wouldn't do. Invariably less glamorous. One interesting feature is the little garden in front of the station. This is not a very Holden feature. Holden was all about practicality, so he probably would have put a space for taxis or a bus stop or something there. But give Heaps his credit, a little bit of greenery fits in very nicely with this largely residential suburb. The escalators are rather ornate, with their uplighters and these signs at the top and bottom. St. John's Wood was lucky to get them. After the Second World War, fluorescent lights were favoured instead of uplighters. That being said, as you can see, St. John's Wood has both. At platform level, the style is very similar to other stations of this era. Obvious comparisons can be made with Swiss Cottage on the same stretch of line, but it also bears a resemblance to some of the Central Line stations constructed during the Second World War, as well as Highgate. This frieze is a classic feature. The tiling is also very worth a look. The dominant colour is a sort of creamy yellow known as biscuit. Before this, stations tended to use white as the main colour. The change may have been because it was a warmer shade, or perhaps because it didn't show dirt as obviously. We just don't know. Interspersed among the plain tiles are a number of relief tiles. These were designed by Harold Stabler. They can also be seen at Bethnal Green, Wanstead, Gants Hill, Redbridge and Aldgate East, and represent the home counties. plus a number of London landmarks and the Underground itself. A design that's unique to St John's Wood is a portrait of Thomas Lord, after whom the cricket ground is named. These tiles are actually replicas of the originals, but I don't mind if you don't. There was also originally some rather fancy tiling in the booking hall, but sadly that has since been stripped out. As a station in a relatively quiet suburb, its history hasn't been particularly eventful. It does have a couple of cultural claims to fame. It appeared in the first Paddington film, and it's very near to Abbey Road, and the world's most famous zebra crossing. The Jams song, Down in the Tube Station at Midnight, features recordings of tube trains made here. I guess that means the song was produced at Abbey Road. I suppose I could just check that, but, I'm busy. St John's Wood is the only currently existing tube station not to include any letters of the word mackerel, which is one of those odd bits of trivia that people like to bring up for some reason. If we're going to be pedantic, St John's Wood does contain the letter A if you spell the full name out. But that's between you and whoever runs the pub quiz. In 1963, a block of flats was plonked on top of the station. The building had been designed to allow something to be built on top of it, but these flats are hardly the most exciting thing that could have been done with the space. In 1979, the station underwent a change of ownership. Well, sort of. The Bakerloo line extension had been built because the Metropolitan line was over-congested and the Bakerloo wasn't. In the post-war years, the Bakerloo began to suffer the same problem as the Metropolitan. In fact, the whole Underground network was overcrowded. The Jubilee line was the proposed solution. It would consist of a new section from Charing Cross to Baker Street. Then it would take over the Bakerloo extension. Also, at some point they were going to extend it into the Docklands or something, but that was in the future. Anyway, on the 1st of May 1979, St John's Wood switched to the Jubilee. These days, the station sees a frequent service, and thanks to its location, is rather busy. It's Grade 2 listed, which I think is a nice little acknowledgement of the work of Stanley Heaps. I think, in a quiet and unostentatious way, it's a very fine station indeed. Good evening, I hope you enjoyed this biscuit tale from the tube. If you did, it would help me if you could leave a like. If you'd like to hear more about the tube, or whatever other nonsense I feel like talking about, then you may wish to subscribe and click on the notification button to be kept up to date. Thanks as always to my generous donors on Ko-fi and Patreon. You are the grout to my ceramics. And I'll see you all again very soon for another tale from the tube, of course.